Welcome. Today we're talking with Helen Beckschi. She is a former privacy officer who led the U.S. privacy team at a major U.S. bank and coordinated globally in that role. Helen, welcome, and thank you for joining us at today's Banker Digest.
My pleasure, Larry. Happy to be here.
Great. All right. Well, Helen, so why are we hearing so much about the increased attention to privacy?
Oh, great question. There's quite a few reasons, many of which you might be familiar. Many of us have experienced potential identity theft, attempts at phishing, but there's also been a lot of attention recently, particularly in the press, around ChatGPT and generative AI. So those are perhaps a few of the primary reasons why there's a lot of attention and a lot of discussion around privacy right now.
Helen, thank you. What are the keys to a solid privacy program?
Great question. If you're starting a new program or you want to refurbish an old program, it's important that you start with some of the basic building blocks. And what I would consider those to be is number one, understand the applicable laws and regulations. Um,
Mhm.
do you understand those applicable to your broker dealer, to your retail bank? If you're in another industry, such as healthcare, do you understand those particular laws and regulations in a meaningful way? Number two, you would want to understand where your data resides. That's necessary for a few reasons. One would be to ensure that it's appropriately protected, particularly if there was some sort of a cyber breach,
Mhm.
a cyber event or data breach, and also for things like data access requests. Next, you would need to understand your company's data lifecycle. By that, I mean, where are your collection points? Where are you collecting information? Where are you sharing that information? How are you using it? How
Mhm.
is it used to potentially report or be transferred to third parties or internally, particularly if it's cross country? And also to make sure you understand the destruction processes. Most people understand who've been in privacy for a while. This might vary by process, product, region, or country. Next, I would pivot to risk assessments. By risk assessments, what I mean is you need to understand a variety of privacy related risks within your organization. And
Mhm.
they tend to be lumped into a few different types of risk assessments. I would say there are operational risk assessments, understanding how things are working, how basic processes and controls are working, and then also perhaps a risk assessment related to let's say, a new regulation and how it might potentially impact your organization, such as with some of the new state laws. And then there's another type of risk assessment known as privacy impact assessments, or PIAs, or DPIAs outside of the US. Those are targeted risk assessments which look at typically a new technology, a new product, to really understand what's going on with respect to this new activity, this kind of change element in your
Mhm.
environment. And that's also, quite frankly, mandated by some of the new state laws within the US. So I think those of us who have worked globally understand that that has been a requirement outside the US for quite a while. Now, last but not least, I would also think about the engagement with your key business partners. And that includes a few things. A, building the relationships, but also developing some cadence and governance structures with those key partners.
Mhm.
That's really important to hopefully eventually embed privacy into their processes if they're not embedded already. Many people might be recognize the term privacy by design, but that
Mhm.
typically only happens if privacy is part of the design for certain particular groups within your organization, such as technology and systems teams. So it's really important to get a seat at the table with key stakeholders where privacy risks reside, and to make sure that you're engaged when there's new processes, systems, or let's say divestitures or acquisitions or expansion into global markets or into new markets.
Great. Thank you, Helen. So, in thinking about developing that privacy program, what are some really good resources, privacy organizations, and other resources that I could tap into?
Well, you're lucky, Larry, right now because there's some fantastic ones out there. I think when I was started in privacy 15 plus years ago, there weren't as many, but one that's been around for quite a while and has a lot of depth and breadth is the International Association of Privacy Professionals. And it's a fantastic organization which has matured with the privacy sector or privacy field. So I would suggest people immediately join the IAPP, if I may say so, and leverage the resources. They have a daily dashboard and really provide ongoing updates about what's going on in privacy in terms of the laws and changing regulations. They also, for example, just stood up an AI particular group to focus on providing analysis around AI and provide training around AI and other facets of privacy. So the IAPP is a critical organization if you're serious about privacy to look at, get involved with, and or join if you can do so. Another fantastic one that is also maturing is the Future of Privacy Forum. They have, again, like the IAPP, wonderful webinars. You can also belong to it, and they have some fantastic stakeholders and Uber SMEs, I would say, speaking to a variety of privacy topics. There's a few others like EPIC, the Electronic Privacy Center, and some of the ones that I leverage quite often, Larry, are some major law firms. Morrison and Foster, MoFo, as many of us know, Baker McKenzie, Ropes and Gray, Mayer Brown have some fantastic resources, free resources, if you go to their website. There's also the Berkeley Law School, which actually has a series of privacy events that you can also attend. Again, free webinars in many cases.
Great. Thank you, Helen. So as you look out, what are some of the emerging issues or concerns with privacy?
Well, I think AI, again, is on the top of everyone's tongues in terms of what does this mean? What are the impacts to privacy? Is it good? Is it bad? And there's just, again, a lot of attention because of the proliferation of it and the fact that it's now feasible that many people, average people, can use it if they so choose, and companies can use it. It used to be something that only, let's say, the military or the government could use for specific purposes. It was quite expensive, and now it's not. So again, emerging issues, AI is probably top on the list. I would say second in the US would be state laws. It wasn't until I think last year that the California law, CCPA, was followed by another state omnibus law. And now we have a proliferation of US privacy state laws, which are, again, demanding things like privacy impact assessments, more careful use, and let's say opt-in or consent for sensitive information. So again, state laws is another topic to stay on top of and to watch for, because again, it's going to impact most companies. And last but not least, there's a lot of discussion around transferring and sharing information between the US and Europe. There's been quite a bit of tension, I'd say, over the past couple of years in terms of finding an appropriate data sharing regime that both economic blocs are happy with. There was some previous transfer mechanisms that were in place for quite a long time, but they were challenged by various individuals within Europe, and the European court system actually upheld those challenges to these transfer mechanisms. So there continues to be a dialogue around this, and we haven't quite settled on a solid transfer regime that makes everyone happy. I mean, there's certainly contractual, standard contractual clauses and things like that that are available for people to use to transfer data. But there used to be much more, I would say, robust data sharing mechanisms in place that have been since removed, primarily because of the challenge from Europe.
Right. Thank you, Helen. Appreciate you taking time today with today's Banker Digest and helping us better understand the expanding concerns and attention around data privacy, as well as the keys to a solid privacy program. Again, thank you, Helen.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Larry.
Okay, so in closing, thank you for joining today's Banker Digest. If you have additional questions for Helen, please see the link in her bio.